August 8, 1944. Officers Club, Royal Air Force Station, Fursfield, England. 2200 hours. Lieutenant Joseph Patrick Kennedy Jr. was drunk and staring at a magazine he wanted to burn. Life magazine. August 7th issue. Just arrived from the States. The cover showed his younger brother John standing on the deck of a patrol torpedo boat in the South Pacific. Tanned, smiling, war hero. The headline read, "The man who would not leave his crew behind." 6 pages inside. Photographs of John in his Navy uniform receiving the Navy and Marine Corps medal from some admiral. Photographs of the wrecked PT-109. Interviews with the crew members John saved. Quotes from President Roosevelt calling John an example of American courage. Joe turned to page 4. There was a sidebar, a small box with text. It said, "Lieutenant Kennedy is the second son of Ambassador Joseph P. Kennedy. His older brother Joseph Jr. also serves in the Navy as a bomber pilot in Europe." 12 words. That was all Joe got. 12 words in his younger brother's heroism story. He picked up his glass, threw it across the room. It shattered against the wall. Whiskey dripping down the wood paneling. The bartender looked up. "Sir, I need you to calm down or leave." Joe stood. The room tilted. How many drinks? 5? 6? He had lost count. "My brother is a hero," Joe said to nobody in particular. "Did you know that? Everyone knows that. PT-109, Japanese destroyer, cut his boat in half. He swam 6 hours towing a wounded man. Used his teeth to grip the life jacket. 6 hours. That is heroism." The bartender was walking toward him. "Sir, you need to leave." "I flew 25 missions. 25 times I could have died. But nobody writes articles about not dying. They write articles about being dramatic and getting your boat sunk and swimming." 2 other officers grabbed Joe's arms, walked him outside, sat him down on the steps. Joe put his head in his hands. He was 29 years old, and his 27-year-old brother was famous, and he was nobody, and he had volunteered for 25 missions, hoping one of them would matter, and none of them did. The door opened behind him. Boots on concrete. "Lieutenant Kennedy, you are wanted in the briefing room." Joe looked up. Commander James Smith, 38 years old, stone face, special operations, the man who had been asking around about pilots who had completed their tours. "It is 2200 hours, Joe said. "I am aware you are wanted now." Joe stood, followed Smith across the dark airfield. The whiskey was still in his system, but the cold air was clearing his head. They entered a hangar, walked to the back, through a door into a small room with no windows. 3 men waited inside, a Navy captain, a civilian in a suit, and another civilian in coveralls who looked like an engineer. Smith closed the door, locked it. "Gentlemen, Operation Aphrodite is classified top secret. What you see and hear does not leave this room." Joe nodded. The captain stood, pulled down a wall map showing the French coast. "The Germans are launching V-2 rockets at London from these sites. The rockets fly at 3,000 miles per hour. Unstoppable. Last month, they killed 1,500 civilians. We cannot shoot them down. We cannot intercept them. The only option is destroying the launch sites." He pointed at 3 red circles on the map. "These bunkers are reinforced concrete, 20 feet thick. Our bombers have hit them 400 times. Not one direct penetration. The bombs bounce off." The civilian in the suit opened a briefcase, pulled out photographs, laid them on the table. Joe looked at the first photograph. It showed a B-17 bomber. But something was wrong. The nose was covered. The gun positions were empty. The interior looked hollowed out. "This is a BQ-8 drone," the suit said. "We strip a retired bomber down to nothing. Remove the armor, the guns, the seats, everything unnecessary. Then we fill it with Torpex high explosive. 21,000 pounds. That is 10.5 tons. The largest flying bomb ever built." He laid out another photograph. "Two pilots take off normally. They climb to altitude. Then they activate a radio control system. A mother plane behind them takes over. The pilots bail out. We guide the drone into the target remotely." Joe stared at the photograph. "You are asking pilots to fly a giant bomb and then jump out?" "Yes." "Has this been tested?" The engineer spoke up for the first time. "We have flown 4 test missions. 2 hit the targets. 1 crashed into the ocean. 1 missed and hit a forest." "What happened to the pilots?" "All 8 bailed out safely." Smith looked at Joe. "We need volunteers, experienced pilots who have completed their combat tours, men who understand the risks." "What are the risks?" "You will be sitting on 10 tons of explosives for approximately 30 minutes. The radio control system is experimental. If the arming system malfunctions, if you cannot bail out, if the radio fails and you cannot land, you die." The captain added, "If the explosives detonate while you are still aboard, there will be nothing left to bury." The room was quiet. Joe thought about that magazine, about 12 words, about going home in 2 weeks and spending the rest of his life as Joseph Kennedy Jr., the older brother who also served. "When?" Joe asked. 4 days, August 12th, weather permitting." "I volunteer." Smith studied his face. "You are drunk." "I am making a decision drunk that I will not regret sober." "You have completed your tour. You can go home. Why would you do this?" Joe met his eyes. "Because I need to do something that matters, and I do not care how dangerous it is." The next morning, Joe woke up with a headache and a summons to report to Hangar 7 at 0600 hours. He arrived on time. Smith was waiting with another pilot. "This is Lieutenant Wilford Willie, radio specialist. He will be your co-pilot." Willie was 26, thin, looked nervous, shook Joe's hand too hard. "So we just flip some switches and jump out?" Willie asked. "That is what they tell me," Joe said. Smith walked them across the airfield to a hard stand where a B-17 sat alone. Bureau number 32271. It looked like a corpse. All the gun positions empty. The nose windows painted black. The skin panels had been removed in places showing the stripped interior. "This is your aircraft," Smith said. "Today you will familiarize yourself with the modifications. Tomorrow you will practice the radio control activation sequence. Day 3 you will practice bailout procedures. Day 4 is mission day." Joe walked around the plane, looked up at it, tried to imagine sitting inside this thing, knowing the entire fuselage behind him was packed with explosives. "Can I see inside?" Joe asked. Smith nodded. Joe climbed through the crew hatch. Willie followed. The interior was bare. 2 seats in the cockpit, basic flight instruments, everything else stripped away. Behind the cockpit bulkhead was empty space where the crew compartment used to be, and behind that, stacked floor to ceiling, were wooden crates. Joe walked back, looked at the crates. They were plain wood, unmarked, strapped down with cargo nets. "What is in the crates?" Joe asked. A ground crew chief appeared behind him. "Torpex, sir. Most powerful explosive we got. Each crate holds 400 pounds. We loaded 53 crates this morning." "Is it stable?" "As long as nobody drops it or shoots it, or detonates the fusing system. Yes, sir. Perfectly stable. Joe looked at the crates. 21,000 pounds of the most powerful explosive the Navy had, 3 feet behind where he would sit. What happens if one crate falls? Joe asked. The crew chief shrugged. Then you, me, this plane, and everything within half a mile vaporizes instantly. But the crates are strapped down real good, sir. They are not going anywhere. Joe felt something cold in his stomach. Not fear, exactly, just awareness. He was going to sit in a chair 3 feet from instant death for 30 minutes and hope nothing went wrong. Willie was pale. I need some air. They climbed out, stood on the hard stand. Willie was breathing hard. You all right? Joe asked. No, I'm not all right. I just saw my death stacked in wooden crates. Then do not volunteer. I already volunteered. If I quit now, I am a coward. Better a living coward than a dead hero. Willie laughed nervously. My mother would agree with you. They spent 2 days learning the radio control system. 6 switches. Flip them in sequence. Verify the mother plane has control. Open the hatch. Jump. On day 3, they practiced bailout procedures. Smith took them up in a regular B-17. No explosives, just practice. At 5,000 feet, Smith gave the order. Bail out. Joe went first, opened the hatch, looked down at England passing below. Green fields, small towns, roads like ribbons. He jumped. The wind hit him like a wall, spinning, tumbling. He pulled the ripcord. The parachute deployed, sudden jerk, then floating, quiet, just the sound of wind in the canopy. He landed in a field, rolled, stood up. The parachute collapsed behind him. 2 minutes later, Willie landed 50 yards away. They gathered the parachutes, waited for the truck to pick them up. That was easy, Willie said. He was smiling. First time since they met. Let us do it again, Joe said. I want to practice until it is automatic. They went up 3 more times that day. By the 4th jump, Joe could do it without thinking. Open hatch, step out, pull cord, land, simple. On the 5th jump, Willie hit the ground wrong. Joe heard him scream, ran over. Willie was on his back. His left ankle was bent at an angle that ankles do not bend. Do not move, Joe said. The medics arrived 10 minutes later, loaded Willie onto a stretcher. One medic looked at the ankle and shook his head. At the base hospital, a doctor told them the ankle was fractured in 2 places. Willie was grounded, no flying, no jumping, done. Smith arrived an hour later, stood beside Willie's bed. I am sorry, sir, Willie said. He looked like he might cry. I landed wrong. It was my fault. Smith said nothing for a moment. Then he looked at Joe. Mission is postponed. We need a replacement radio operator. That will take time. Joe felt something inside him crack. How long? 2 weeks minimum, maybe 3. No. Excuse me? Find me a replacement. We fly tomorrow. Smith stared at him. There is no one trained on the radio system except Willie. Then find someone who can learn fast. Lieutenant Kennedy, this is not a game. The radio operator needs to know. I do not care what he needs to know. I will teach him tonight. We fly tomorrow. Smith's face went hard. You are that desperate to die? I am that desperate to matter. Smith was quiet. Then he nodded. Wait here. He left. Came back 20 minutes later with another pilot. This is Lieutenant Earl Olson, 22 years old, radio technician. He arrived in England 3 days ago. He has never flown on a combat mission. He has never jumped from an aircraft. But he is all we have. Earl looked terrified. Young, baby-faced. He could not have been more than 150 pounds. You volunteering for this? Joe asked. Earl swallowed. Commander Smith said if I do this mission, I get rotation home afterward. If I say no, I go to a regular bomber crew. That is not an answer. Then yes, I volunteer, I guess. Joe looked at Smith. We have 12 hours. I can teach him the radio system in 12 hours. Smith shook his head. This is insane. He has never jumped. He does not know the aircraft. Then I will teach him. We fly tomorrow, or I find someone else to authorize this mission. Smith studied Joe's face. Whatever he saw there made him nod. All right, you have 12 hours. But Lieutenant Kennedy, understand something. If that boy dies because you rushed this, it is on you, not me. You. That night, Joe and Earl sat in the empty briefing room with the radio control panel in front of them. Joe showed him the 6 switches, showed him the sequence, showed him the backup procedures. Earl's hands were shaking. What if I do it wrong? Then we die, so do not do it wrong. They practiced until 0400 hours. Earl could do the sequence in his sleep. Good, Joe said. Now let me show you how to jump from an airplane. We do not have time for practice jumps. No, we do not. So when we bail out tomorrow, I will go first. You follow. Pull your ripcord as soon as you are clear of the plane. Do not wait. Do not think. Just pull. What if my parachute does not open? Then you have about 30 seconds to make peace with God. Earl laughed. It sounded like a sob. At 0600 hours, they walked to Bureau number 32271. Ground crew had finished final preparations. The Torpex was loaded. The radio control system was installed. The mother plane was ready. Smith met them at the aircraft. Last chance to abort, Joe looked at him. We are flying this mission. Lieutenant Kennedy, I read your file. Your brother is a hero. You are trying to compete with him. That is a bad reason to die. I am not trying to compete. I am trying to do my job. Your job was 25 missions. You did your job. This is something else. Then what is it? Suicide with extra steps. Joe climbed into the aircraft. Earl followed. They strapped in. Joe started the engines. All 4 caught and held. Tower cleared them for takeoff at 1700 hours. Joe released the brakes. The bomber rolled forward. Heavy, slow, 21,000 pounds heavier than it should be. He pushed the throttles forward. The engine screamed. The plane accelerated. 100 miles per hour. 120. 140. Rotate. The nose came up. The wheels left the ground. Bureau number 32271 climbed into the evening sky. At 500 feet, a warning light on the panel lit up red. Armed. Earl saw it. That light should not be on yet. The bomb is not supposed to arm until we activate radio control. Joe looked at the light, looked at the altimeter. They were still over the airfield, directly above Fursfield Base. 3,000 men below them. Can you disarm it? Joe asked. Earl was staring at the panel. I do not know. I have been on this plane for 12 hours. Willie knew this system. I do not. The light stayed red. Joe looked down. He could see the runway below, the hangars, the barracks. If they exploded now, the blast would kill everyone. Try to disarm it, Joe said. Earl reached for the switches. His hand was shaking so hard he could barely grip them. The light flickered, went dark, came back red. I do not know what I am doing, Earl whispered. Joe kept climbing, getting away from the base. Every second put them farther from the men below, but also closer to the 30-minute timer, closer to the bailout point, closer to whatever was going to happen. Keep trying, Joe said. The light flickered again. August 12th, 1944. 17:05 hours, 2,000 feet over England. The armed light stayed red. Earl had his hands on the radio control panel, trying every switch combination he knew. Nothing worked. Every time the light went dark for 3 seconds, then came back red. "It keeps resetting," Earl said. His voice was shaking. "Something is wrong with the circuit. The arming system thinks we activated it, but we did not." Joe kept climbing. 2,500 feet, 3,000, getting farther from Fursfield, getting farther from the men on the ground who would die if 10 tons of Torpex detonated over their heads. The radio crackled, Smith's voice from the mother plane following 1,000 yards behind. "Kennedy, we see your armed light. What is your status?" "Light came on at 500 feet. Olson is trying to disarm. No success." "Abort mission. Land immediately." "Negative. If we land with the bomb armed and it detonates on the runway, then bail out now. Get out of that plane." Joe looked at Earl. Earl looked back. His face was white. "We are over farmland," Joe said into the radio. "Civilians below." "Then get over the ocean. You have maybe 2 minutes. Bail out over water." Joe pushed the throttles forward. The engines roared. 4,000 feet, 4,500. The coast was 12 miles away. The armed light flickered, went dark, stayed dark for 5 seconds. "I think I got it," Earl said. "I think it is disarmed." The light came back red, started flashing, slow at first, 1 flash per second, then faster. "That is the detonation sequence," Earl whispered. "We have 30 seconds. Joe pulled the bailout hatch release. The handle moved, but the hatch did not open. He pulled harder. Nothing. "It is jammed," Joe said. "Help me." Earl was frozen, staring at the flashing light. 20 seconds. Joe grabbed him, shook him. "Olson, help me open this hatch." They pulled together. The hatch moved half an inch, stuck. The armed light was flashing so fast now, it was almost solid red. Smith's voice screaming on the radio. "Kennedy, bail out! Bail out now!" Joe and Earl pulled. The hatch flew open. Wind screamed into the cockpit. "Go!" Joe shouted. Earl looked at the open hatch, looked at the ground 4,000 feet below. "I am scared," Earl said. "Go anyway." Earl stepped toward the hatch. The world turned white. Lieutenant Harry Fane was flying the mother plane 1,000 yards behind. He was watching through binoculars, watching the armed light flashing, watching the bailout hatch open, watching someone appear at the hatch. Then Kennedy's B-17 disappeared in a ball of white light brighter than the sun. Fane threw his arm across his face. The light burned even with his eyes closed. When he looked back, there was nothing. No airplane. No debris falling in large pieces. Just a massive smoke cloud expanding outward. Small fragments raining down like metal snow. Some pieces burning. Most just falling. The shockwave hit 3 seconds later. Fane's plane shook violently. Instruments rattled. His co-pilot shouted something Fane could not hear over the roar. Fane keyed his radio. His voice sounded dead. "Tower, this is Mother Bird. Primary aircraft has detonated. No parachutes observed. No survivors." 5 seconds of silence. Then, "Confirm no survivors." "Confirmed. They were still inside when it exploded. There is nothing left." Below them, burning debris was falling into forest near the village of Blytheburg. Trees catching fire. The smoke cloud spreading like a black stain across the evening sky. "Return to base," Tower said. Fane turned the mother plane around. His co-pilot was crying. They were right there. The hatch was open. Someone was about to jump. 5 more seconds. 5 seconds Kennedy did not have. 40 minutes later, Commander Smith walked into the base hospital, found the room where Lieutenant Wilford Willie sat in bed with his left ankle in a cast elevated on pillows. Willie looked up, saw Smith's face, knew immediately. "No," Willie said. "No, no, no." Smith closed the door behind him, stood there, did not know how to say it. "The mission," Smith started. "There was an accident. Where is Earl? Where is Kennedy?" The aircraft detonated at 17:17 hours. Both pilots were still aboard. There were no survivors. Willie stared at him, processing, not believing. "Earl is dead?" "Yes." "Kennedy?" "Yes." Willie looked at his cast, at his broken ankle, at the stupid injury that had grounded him and put Earl on that plane instead. "That was my mission," Willie said quietly. "I was supposed to be there. You were injured. Olson volunteered to replace you. He had 12 hours of training. 12 hours! I had 3 weeks. I knew that system. He did not know it." Willie's voice was rising, getting louder. "He died because I broke my ankle. He died because I landed wrong on a practice jump. He died because I was not there. He died because the arming system malfunctioned," Smith said. "That is not your fault. It is my fault. I should have been on that plane. It should have been me sitting next to Kennedy. It should have been me trying to disarm that system. Earl did not know what he was doing." Willie grabbed the bed rails, tried to pull himself up. His broken ankle hit the bed frame. He screamed from the pain, but kept trying to stand. "I have to tell his family. I have to tell them it should have been me." A nurse ran in, grabbed Willie's shoulders. "Sir, you need to stay in bed. Your ankle. I do not care about my ankle. Do you understand? I do not care. Earl Olson is dead, and it should have been me." Willie was crying now, full breakdown, trying to stand on a broken ankle. The nurse and Smith pushed him back down. "He was 22 years old," Willie sobbed. "He got to England 3 days ago. 3 days. He was terrified. He did not want to fly that mission, but he did it because I broke my ankle, because I could not do my job." "You did not cause this," Smith said. "Then who did? Who put a 22-year-old kid with 12 hours of training on a plane with 10 tons of explosives? Who decided that was acceptable?" Willie looked at Smith, at the guilt on his face. "You did. You sent him, and I let him go. We both killed him." Smith had no answer, because Willie was right. The nurse gave Willie a sedative. He fought it, but eventually his eyes closed. His breathing slowed. He stopped crying. Smith stood there for another minute, looking at the sleeping man who would spend the rest of his life knowing someone died in his place. Then he walked out. At 1400 hours on August 13th, a Navy staff car pulled up to the Kennedy family estate in Hyannisport, Massachusetts. 2 officers in dress uniforms stepped out, walked to the front door. Ambassador Joseph Patrick Kennedy Sr. was in his study reading the newspaper when he saw them through the window. 2 officers, dress uniforms, walking with that slow, careful pace that only meant one thing. He stood. The newspaper fell from his hands. Rose was in the living room with the younger children. She heard Joseph's footsteps, looked up, saw his face. "What is it?" she asked. "Officers outside, 2 of them." Rose stood. Her hand went to her mouth. "No, not Joseph." The doorbell rang. Joseph walked to the door, opened it. The 2 officers saluted. "Ambassador Kennedy, Mrs. Kennedy, may we come in?" Joseph stepped aside, let them enter. Rose was standing in the hallway. The younger children, Teddy and Jean, were peeking around the corner. "Children, go upstairs," Rose said. Her voice was shaking. "Mom, what is wrong?" Teddy asked. He was 12. Go, now. They went. The senior officer removed his hat. Sir, ma'am, I regret to inform you that your son, Lieutenant Joseph P. Kennedy, Jr., was killed in action on August 12th while conducting a combat operation in the European theater. Rose made a sound, not a scream, not a cry, just a sound like air being forced out of her lungs. Joseph caught her, held her up. His face showed nothing, blank, frozen. How? Joseph asked. His voice was steady, cold. I am not authorized to provide operational details, sir. The mission is classified. I am a former United States ambassador. I have security clearance. Tell me how my son died. Sir, the operation is classified above my clearance level. I genuinely do not have the information you are asking for. Rose pulled away from Joseph, walked right up to the officer. You are telling me my son is dead, but you cannot tell me how he died? You cannot tell me what he was doing? You cannot tell me anything? Ma'am, I am deeply sorry. The circumstances of his death involve classified weapon systems and operational procedures. The details cannot be released. Cannot or will not? Both, ma'am. Rose slapped him, full force across the face. The officer did not move, did not react, just stood there and took it. My son is dead, Rose said, and you will not even tell me why. Kathleen came running down the stairs. She had heard the shouting. What is happening? Joseph turned to her. Your brother is dead. Kathleen stopped, stared. Which brother? Joseph. Kathleen sat down on the stairs, put her head in her hands, started crying. The officers stood there, witnesses to a family breaking apart. They had done this before, delivered death notices, watched families collapse. It never got easier. We can provide counseling services, the junior officer said. If your family needs support, get out, Joseph said. Both of you, get out of my house. The officers left. The staff car pulled away. Joseph stood in the hallway. Rose was crying against the wall. Kathleen was crying on the stairs. Upstairs, the younger children were crying too, even though they did not fully understand. Joseph walked to young Joe's childhood bedroom, opened the door. The room looked the same as it had when Joe left for the war. Baseball trophies on the shelf, books on the desk, a photograph of Joe in his Navy uniform on the dresser. Joseph sat on the bed, picked up Joe's old baseball glove from the nightstand. The leather was cracked, worn. Joe had used this glove in high school. For the first time in 20 years, Ambassador Joseph Patrick Kennedy Sr. cried. 4,000 miles away, in a Navy hospital in the South Pacific, a chaplain walked into John F. Kennedy's room. John was lying in bed. His back was immobilized from surgery. He could not sit up without severe pain. He saw the chaplain's face. Knew. It is Joe, John said. Not a question, a statement. The chaplain nodded. Your brother Joseph was killed in action on August 12th in Europe. I am very sorry. How? The details are classified. I do not have specifics. Was he shot down? Was it combat? I do not know. The mission circumstances are restricted information. John lay there, could not move, could not sit up, could not do anything but lie flat and stare at the ceiling and try to process that his older brother was dead. He sent me a letter last week, John said. He said he was doing something big, something important. He could not tell me what. The chaplain said nothing. He was trying to be a hero, John continued. His voice was flat, emotionless. He was trying to compete with me because of PT-109, because I got medals and headlines and he did not. I am sure that is not. It is exactly why. I know my brother. He always had to be first, always had to be best, and I became the hero, and he could not stand it. John's eyes filled with tears. First time he had cried since the PT-109 sinking. He died trying to beat me, and I do not even know how. I do not know what he did. I do not know if it mattered. A nurse came in, saw John crying. Do you need something for the pain? My brother is dead, and nobody will tell me how. What am I supposed to do with that? The nurse had no answer. John lay there for hours, thinking, processing, realizing that if Joe had not died, Joe would be the one going into politics after the war. Joe was older, more experienced, father's favorite. Joe was supposed to be the first Kennedy in Congress, maybe the Senate, maybe the presidency someday. But now Joe was gone, and John was the oldest surviving son, which meant all of that fell to him now. Father's ambitions, the family legacy, everything. I have to be you now, John whispered to the empty room. You died, and now I have to be you. At 0300 hours on August 14th, Commander James Smith sat alone in his office. The base was quiet. Most personnel were asleep. Smith sat at his desk, staring at a roster sheet. 2 names circled in red. Kennedy, Olson. He picked up the phone, dialed the operator. I need a long-distance line to Minnesota. 3 minutes later, the connection went through. The phone rang 4 times. A man answered, groggy, confused. Hello? Smith opened his mouth to speak. No words came out. Hello? Who is this? Smith tried again. Mr. Olson, this is Commander James Smith with the United States Navy. I am calling about your son, Earl. Silence on the other end. Then, is he all right? Smith could not say it. The words would not come. He sat there holding the phone, hearing Olson's father breathing, waiting. Is my son all right? The father asked again. His voice was different now, scared. Smith hung up. He tried again, dialed the number. It rang. Olson's father answered immediately. Commander Smith, is that you? What happened to Earl? Smith hung up again. He could not do it, could not say the words, could not tell this man his 22-year-old son was dead. Smith stood, threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall. Plastic cracked, the receiver dangling by its cord. He grabbed the roster sheet, crumpled it, threw it. Then he screamed, just screamed into the empty office. No words, just rage and guilt and grief. He picked up his desk lamp, threw it. Glass shattered. He pounded his fists on the desk until his knuckles bled. Pounded until the pain in his hands was greater than the pain in his chest. Other officers heard, gathered outside his office door. Nobody entered. They just listened to their commander destroying his office and knew why. 6 days later, Navy investigators found the cause. Faulty wiring in the radio control panel. Installation error. Someone had connected the arming circuit to the wrong system. When Kennedy turned on his radio at 500 feet, it activated the bomb. No one had checked the installation, no quality control, just signatures on paperwork. Kennedy and Olson had died because someone did not check their work. 16 years later, July 15th, 1960, Los Angeles, California. A television in a Boston bar showed the Democratic National Convention. Senator John Fitzgerald Kennedy accepting the nomination for President of the United States. An old man sat at the bar watching. Commander James Smith, retired, 62 years old now, gray, tired. He came to this bar most nights. On the television, JFK was giving his acceptance speech. My brother Joseph died serving this country in World War II. He was a hero. He gave his life so that others might live free. I run for president to continue his legacy, to honor his sacrifice, To build the America he died defending. The crowd cheered. Thousands of people, all believing the story, all believing Joe Kennedy had died heroically in combat. Smith finished his drink, signaled for another. The bartender poured. "You served in the war, right?" "Yes." "Navy?" "Yes." "Did you know Kennedy's brother, the one who died?" Smith looked at the television, at JFK smiling and waving, at the crowds chanting his name. "I killed him," Smith said. The bartender laughed, thought it was a joke. "What?" Smith looked at his drink. "Nothing, just talking to myself." On the television, JFK continued. "My brother believed in service, in sacrifice, in doing what is right no matter the cost." Smith turned off the television, dropped money on the bar, walked out into the night. Behind him, the convention continued. JFK smiling, America cheering, nobody knowing the truth about what really happened on August 12th, 1944. Nobody knowing that Joe Kennedy had died 5 seconds before escaping. Nobody knowing about the faulty wiring. Nobody knowing about Earl Olson, who should not have been on that plane. Nobody knowing about Willie lying in a hospital bed with a broken ankle, knowing someone died in his place. The truth was buried, classified, hidden, and Joe Kennedy became exactly what he had been trying not to be. A footnote, a name mentioned in someone else's story, the older brother who also served, January 28, 1961, the Oval Office, Washington, D.C. President John Fitzgerald Kennedy sat behind his desk and stared at 12 manila folders marked Top Secret Operation Aphrodite. He had been president for 8 days. 8 days of meetings and briefings and ceremonies. And every night he went to bed thinking about his brother, about the last letter Joe sent, about the words, "doing something big." Now he knew what it was. The Secretary of the Navy had tried to block the files, said they were still classified for national security reasons. Kennedy had pulled rank, ordered them delivered. They arrived that morning by armed courier. Kennedy opened the first folder, read the mission briefing. Radio-controlled bomber, 10 tons of explosives, experimental technology. He opened the second folder, found photographs. The first photograph showed a B-17 with its nose painted black. Bureau number 32271. Joe's plane. The plane that killed him. The second photograph showed the same plane being loaded. Ground crew rolling wooden crates up a ramp into the fuselage. 53 crates, 21,000 pounds of Torpex. The third photograph showed a crater, a forest, burned trees, debris scattered across half a mile. The caption read, "Impact Site, Blythburgh, England, August 12, 1944. Kennedy put the photograph down. His hands were shaking. He opened the investigation report, flipped to the conclusion page. 1 paragraph, 3 sentences. Cause of premature detonation. Installation error in radio control arming circuit. Faulty wiring connected arming system to aircraft radio. When pilot activated radio at 500 feet altitude, bomb armed 30 minutes early. Quality control inspection not performed despite signed documentation. Kennedy read it 3 times. Installation error. Joe died because someone wired a circuit wrong and nobody checked. Kennedy stood, walked to the window, looked out at the rose garden, tried to breathe, could not. He picked up the folder, threw it across the Oval Office. Papers flew everywhere. Photographs scattered across the presidential seal on the carpet. Installation error? He grabbed another folder, threw it, then another. 12 folders, hundreds of pages. All of it classified for 17 years. All of it hidden. The door burst open. 2 Secret Service agents rushed in, hands on their weapons. "Mr. President, Get out! The agents looked at each other, at the president standing in the middle of scattered classified documents, at the fury on his face. Sir, we heard. I said get out. Close the door. Nobody enters. They backed out, closed the door. Kennedy stood there, surrounded by papers, by photographs of his dead brother's airplane, by investigation reports that said Joe died for nothing. He had built his political career partly on Joe's death, the heroic older brother, the sacrifice, the legacy. He had used it in speeches, in interviews, in campaign ads. My brother died so that others might live free. That was the line. He had said it 1,000 times, believed it, made other people believe it. But it was not true. Joe died because someone at Naval Air Station Norfolk wired a circuit wrong, and some inspector signed off without checking, and the Navy sent the mission anyway, because destroying German bunkers was more important than 2 pilots. Kennedy sat on the floor, right there on the presidential seal, sat down and put his head in his hands and cried. For the first time since Joe died 17 years ago, John Kennedy cried. He cried for his brother, who died trying to compete with him, who could not stand being the older brother who was not a hero, who volunteered for a suicide mission because Jack got the headlines and Joe got nothing. He cried for Earl Olson, who had 12 hours of training and died because Willie broke his ankle. He cried for all the lies, all the speeches, all the times he said Joe died heroically in combat when the truth was Joe died in an accident over friendly territory. An hour later, Kennedy called his secretary. Get me Commander James Smith, retired, find him. I do not care where he is. I want him in this office tomorrow. The next day, Smith walked into the Oval Office. He was 63 years old, gray, thin. He had not expected to ever see a Kennedy again. Kennedy stood behind his desk, did not offer to shake hands, just pointed at a chair. Sit, Smith sat. Kennedy held up the investigation report. I read the files, all of them. I know what happened to my brother. Smith said nothing. You sent him on a mission with experimental technology that had a 30% failure rate. Yes, sir. You knew the equipment was faulty? Yes, sir. And you sent him anyway? Your brother volunteered, Mr. President. I told him it was dangerous. I told him. Kennedy slammed the report on the desk. He volunteered because I was a hero, and he was not. Because everyone knew about PT-109, and nobody knew his name. He died trying to beat me. Yes, sir. I believe that is true. Kennedy walked around the desk, stood in front of Smith. You should have stopped him. You should have said no. I tried. He would not listen. He was desperate to matter. I read your notes. I know. But you were the commanding officer. You could have refused his request. You could have grounded him. You could have saved his life. Smith met his eyes. Yes, sir, I could have. But Navy Command wanted the mission flown, wanted those V-2 sites destroyed. I was ordered to find volunteers. Your brother volunteered. I sent him. Kennedy grabbed Smith by the collar, pulled him out of the chair. My brother is dead because you followed orders. Yes, sir. My mother spent 17 years not knowing the truth. My father died believing Joe was a combat hero. Yes, sir. Kennedy was shaking him now. Secret Service outside the door could hear, but did not enter. The president was assaulting a civilian, and they just listened. You should have stopped him. You should have refused the mission. You should have. Kennedy's voice broke. He released Smith, stepped back, sat on the edge of his desk. I used his death, Kennedy said quietly. I built my career on it. The heroic Kennedy brothers, one who died, one who lived to serve. That was my campaign. That was how I won. And it was all based on a lie. Smith straightened his jacket. Mr. President, what are you going to do with this information? I do not know. If I release it, I destroy my brother's legacy. Everyone learns he died in an accident, not a hero, just another pilot in an experimental program that failed. And if you hide it, then I am lying, like the Navy has been lying for 17 years. They stood in silence. You have been lying for 17 years, Smith said finally. Every speech, every interview, every time you said your brother died heroically. You were lying because you did not know the truth. Now you do. So you have a choice. Keep lying, or tell the truth and watch his legacy collapse. Kennedy looked at him. Get out. Smith walked to the door. Stopped. Mr. President, your brother did volunteer. He did try to bail out. He came within 5 seconds of escaping. That took courage. Maybe the mission was flawed. Maybe the technology failed. But he was willing to die for something he believed mattered. That is heroism, even if it was built on faulty wiring. Get out, Smith left. Kennedy sat in the Oval Office, surrounded by classified files and photographs of his dead brother and the weight of 17 years of lies. He did not release the files, did not tell the truth, just kept lying, because the lie was easier than the truth. 14 years later, everything changed. May 12, 1975. Hyannisport, Massachusetts. Rose Kennedy was 85 years old and reading an investigation report that made her want to kill someone. The Freedom of Information Act had finally declassified the Operation Aphrodite files. A reporter had sent her a copy. She had been reading for 2 hours. Installation error, faulty wiring, quality control failure. Her son died because someone did not do their job. Rose picked up the phone, called the Department of the Navy. This is Rose Kennedy. I want to speak with whoever was in charge of Operation Aphrodite. Ma'am, that program ended in 1944. The personnel involved are... I do not care. Find Commander James Smith. He ran the program. I want to speak with him. Ma'am, Commander Smith is retired. He is a civilian. We cannot... I am Rose Kennedy. My son died in that program. You will find him, and you will tell him to come see me. Or I will call every newspaper in this country and tell them the Navy is refusing to let me speak with the man who killed my son. 3 days later, Smith knocked on the door of the Kennedy compound. A maid answered, led him to the library. Rose sat in a chair by the window, thin, gray, but her eyes were sharp, angry. Mrs. Kennedy, you wanted to see me. Sit down. Smith sat. Rose held up the investigation report. You sent my son to die on faulty equipment. Mrs. Kennedy, I understand you are angry. Do not tell me you understand. Do not tell me he volunteered. Do not give me excuses. She stood, walked toward him, used her cane for support, 85 years old and furious. You knew that radio system had a 30% failure rate. You knew the arming circuit was experimental. You knew the quality control was inadequate. And you sent my son anyway. Yes, ma'am. Why? Because Navy Command wanted the mission flown. Because we were trying to destroy German rocket sites. Because your son volunteered and I could not say no. Rose hit him with her cane, full force across the shoulder. Smith did not move. She hit him again. My son, again. He was 29 years old, again. He had his whole life. She kept hitting him, the cane striking his shoulder, his arm, his back. Smith just sat there and took it. Rose collapsed into her chair, crying, the cane falling from her hand. My boy, she sobbed, my Joseph. Smith sat in silence. Let her cry. There was nothing to say, no words that would help. After several minutes, Rose looked up. Why did you send the mission if you knew the equipment was faulty? Smith reached into his jacket, pulled out an envelope. Old, yellowed, sealed. I wrote this letter to your family on August 13th, 1944, the day after your son died. I never sent it. I was ordered to classify everything, but I wrote it anyway. I have kept it for 31 years. He handed her the envelope. It is my confession. Everything that went wrong. Everything I knew. Everything I should have done differently. You can publish it, burn it, whatever you want. I just want you to know the truth. Rose opened the envelope. Inside was a letter in faded handwriting. To the Kennedy family, I am writing to confess my responsibility for the death of your son, Lieutenant Joseph P. Kennedy, Jr. On August 12, 1944, I sent him on a mission I knew was dangerous. The radio control technology was experimental. The arming system had failed in previous tests. The installation had not been properly inspected. I recommended postponing the mission until the systems were improved. I was overruled by my superiors. They wanted the bunkers destroyed immediately. I followed orders. I sent your son to fly a plane packed with 10 tons of explosives, knowing there was a significant chance something would go wrong. Something did go wrong. The arming circuit was wired incorrectly. When Lieutenant Kennedy activated his radio, it armed the bomb 30 minutes early. He and Lieutenant Olson attempted to bail out. The bomb detonated before they could escape. They died 5 seconds before reaching safety. I am responsible. I followed orders when I should have refused. I sent men to die when I should have said no. I am sorry, Commander James Smith. Rose folded the letter. Put it back in the envelope. Why did you not send this? Because I was a coward. Because admitting failure is harder than hiding it. Because the Navy classified everything, and I let them. My husband died not knowing the truth. He spent 25 years believing Joseph died a hero in combat. I know. My son John became president using his brother's death in campaign speeches. He lied to millions of people because you hid the truth. Yes, ma'am. Rose looked at him. Have you spent 31 years feeling guilty? Yes, ma'am. Every day. Good, because I have spent 31 years mourning, and now I learn he died for nothing. Killed by carelessness and poor quality control. That is worse than enemy fire. That is worse than combat. That is just waste. She stood. Get out of my house. Take your confession. I do not want it. Nothing you write can bring my son back. Smith stood, started to leave, stopped at the door. Mrs. Kennedy, for what it is worth, your son was brave. He volunteered knowing the risks. He tried to save his co-pilot. He died trying to do something important. The mission failed, but his intention was noble. Noble intentions do not fill the empty chair at my table. Get out. Smith left. 7 years later, something happened that changed everything. November 3rd, 1982. Seattle, Washington. 3 in the morning. Wilfred Willie woke up screaming. Same nightmare. Always the same. He was on Bureau number 32271, sitting next to Kennedy, the armed light flashing red. And he could fix it. He knew the arming system. He could disarm the bomb. But his hands would not move. He was frozen, and Earl was there instead. Earl who did not know the system. Earl fumbling with switches, Kennedy shouting, the light flashing faster. Then white light, and he woke up screaming. 64 years old and still having the same nightmare 38 years later. Willie got out of bed, went to his closet, pulled out a box he kept hidden behind old clothes. Inside was his service pistol, kept since 1944. Loaded. He sat in his living room, looked at the gun, thought about Earl, 22 years old, dead because Willie broke his ankle on a practice jump. Dead because Willie was not there. 38 years of survivor guilt. 38 years of nightmares. 38 years of knowing someone died in his place. Willie wrote a note. To whoever finds this, Earl Olson died August 12, 1944 because I was not there. He took my place on that mission. He died and I lived. I cannot live with this anymore. I am sorry. He put the note on the table, put the gun to his head. The phone rang. Willie closed his eyes, finger on the trigger. The phone kept ringing. He answered. What? Is this Wilford Willie, former Navy radio technician? Who is this? Boeing Test Flight Operations. We have your name listed as technical expert on radio control systems. We have an emergency. Drone malfunction. The system is based on the old Aphrodite program technology. You worked on that, right? Willie froze. What did you say? Aphrodite program, 1944. Radio-controlled bombers. We are testing a new UAV using similar technology. The arming system is malfunctioning. You are listed as one of the few people still alive who worked on the original system. Can you help? Willie looked at the gun in his hand, at the suicide note on the table. I will be there in 20 minutes. He drove to Boeing. An engineer met him at the gate, led him to a hangar where a small drone sat surrounded by technicians. The arming circuit keeps activating randomly, the engineer said. We cannot figure out why. The system is similar to the World War II program you worked on. Willie looked at the drone, at the radio control panel, saw the arming light flashing red, saw August 12, 1944, saw Kennedy and Earl dying because nobody could fix this exact problem. I know what it is, Willie said. I have seen this malfunction before. He opened the panel, traced the wiring, found the problem in 3 minutes. A circuit connected to the wrong terminal. The same mistake that killed Kennedy and Earl. Here, this wire. It is in the wrong position. When you activate the main radio, it triggers the arming system, just like the original Aphrodite drones. The engineer stared. How did you find that so fast? Because 2 men died teaching me. They fixed the wiring, tested the system. The arming light stayed dark. The malfunction was resolved. The engineer shook Willie's hand. You just saved this program. Thank you. Willie drove home as the sun came up, went to his living room, picked up the suicide note, tore it into pieces, put the gun back in the box, hid it in the closet. For the first time in 38 years, the nightmare changed that night. He dreamed he was on the plane. But this time, when the armed light came on, his hands moved. He reached for the panel, fixed the wiring, disarmed the bomb. Kennedy and Earl bailed out safely, parachutes opening, both men landing in an English field and walking away. It was just a dream, but it felt real. August 12th, 1994. Blythburgh, England. 50 years after the explosion, 3 people stood at a memorial plaque in the forest where pieces of Bureau number 32271 had fallen. Rose Kennedy, 94 years old, in a wheelchair. Daughter Eunice pushing her. Margaret Olson, 70 years old, Earl's sister, flying in from Minnesota. Wilford Willie, 76 years old, still having nightmares, still alive. A British official gave a speech about sacrifice and heroism and the debt owed to those who died in the war. 20 people attended, mostly locals, a few historians. a reporter. When the speech ended and the crowd dispersed, the three survivors remained. Rose looked at the plaque. Lieutenant Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. and Lieutenant Earl Olson died here August 12, 1944, during a classified combat operation. Their sacrifice advanced technology that continues to save lives today. "Do you believe that?" Margaret asked. "That their deaths advanced technology?" Willie answered. "Last week I fixed a military drone that had the same malfunction that killed your brother and Mrs. Kennedy's son. Same arming circuit problem, same faulty wiring. I fixed it because I knew what to look for. Because Joe and Earl died teaching me what goes wrong." Rose turned her wheelchair to face him. "My son died for technology that took 50 years to work. Is that supposed to comfort me?" "No, ma'am, nothing comforts this." Margaret looked at the forest. Earl was 22. He would be 72 now. He could have had children, grandchildren, a whole life. He lost everything because he broke his ankle, and my brother took his place for one mission. Willie closed his eyes. "I know, I think about that every day. It should have been me." "But it was not," Rose said. Her voice was sharp, angry still after 50 years. "It was my son, and your friend, and we are left here, old and alive, and remembering them forever young and dead." They stood in silence. "I hate that his death mattered more than his life," Rose said finally. "Joseph died trying to be a hero. He got his wish, but the cost was everything." Willie looked at her. "Mrs. Kennedy, I have had the same nightmare for 50 years. Earl and your son dying, me not being there. But last week after I fixed that drone, I dreamed something different. I dreamed I saved them, disarmed the bomb. They jumped and lived. It was just a dream, but it felt real." "Did they live in your dream?" "Yes, ma'am, they lived." Rose was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Then maybe that is enough," she said. "Maybe somewhere they did live. Maybe somewhere Joe came home and became the politician he wanted to be. Maybe somewhere Earl had those grandchildren. Maybe somewhere none of this happened." "Maybe," Willie said. They stayed until sunset. 3 old people mourning 2 young men who died 50 years ago because someone wired a circuit wrong and nobody checked. Then they left, back to their lives, back to their memories, back to carrying the weight of August 12, 1944, until they died. Rose Kennedy died 10 months later, age 95. She never stopped mourning Joseph. Margaret Olson died in 1998. Wilford Willie died in 2003, age 85. His last words to the nurse were, "Tell Earl I am sorry." The nightmares ended when he did.